The Gordie Howe International Bridge is set to open later this month after weeks of delays, but under a revised agreement, and Canada will forego more revenue than originally expected. The 6-lane crossing between Windsor and Detroit has been ready to go for weeks. Its opening was held up after U.S. President Donald Trump criticized the project. Several media outlets now report that Canada will receive 50% of the bridge's net toll profits over the first 15 years, with the other half going into an economic development fund. The deal also gives the U.S. a say if Canada wants to raise tolls by more than 10% or drop them below regional averages, and that is a shift from the original plan. Canada financed the bridge's entire construction, $6.4 billion, expecting to collect all toll revenues until that investment was recouped. Prime Minister Mark Carney has defended the new terms as good for Canada, saying there will be little net profits to divide during those first 15 years. But the federal Conservatives see things differently, and joining me now is Shuvaloy Majumdar. He's the Conservative critic for Canada-U.S. relations. Mr. Majumdar, thanks very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
And so your party is calling on the government to release the full agreement. What answers are you looking for specifically?
Well, first of all, are there side letters or marginal agreements that come with these things that we are unaware of? Do we have a sense that there's been a change in any of the bridge's ownership, its governance, liabilities, or legal structures? What are we actually receiving in return to see a bridge open that we paid fully for? I think that's kind of the nub of it. We haven't seen a lot of transparency from Prime Minister Carney on the nature of the negotiations or the full deal. And I think Canadians are right to understand exactly what they have to pony up in this context.
So the bridge is now set to open on July 27th. We'll see if that eventually does come to pass. In the meantime, the Prime Minister, as I was mentioning, is arguing that Canada isn't giving up as much as critics suggest. He says the toll revenues first cover things like servicing costs, debt repayments, and only what's left after that will be split for 15 years. What do you make of that response from the Prime Minister?
Look, I think this bridge negotiation sits in a long string of concessions that the Prime Minister's had to make. I mean, because he's been pursuing this wait-and-see approach with a deal for North America, a deal for Canada and the United States, we have watched him concede on issue after issue after issue, whether it's a DST, the digital service tax, the Netflix tax, whether it's on defense spending, on the Gordie Howe Bridge now. These are all piecemeal issues that are being treated as such because we are not going to the table to the United States with a comprehensive assessment of what the Canadian interest is and how we're going to bring order to our economic and security relationships and arrangements with the United States. And so we have these vulnerabilities in which I understand that we're up against a tough negotiator. We're up against an unpredictable negotiator. The government, the Prime Minister has our sympathy on the tactics of the day-to-day negotiation. But what we're seeing is that this wait-and-see approach that the Prime Minister has taken to the United States over the last 15 months has essentially squandered the opportunity to genuinely look at all of these issues as part of a bigger puzzle and how we are going to secure our interests for our workers for the long term.
You mentioned there that Canada is facing a tough negotiator, and of course that's in reference, I believe, to President Trump. He, of course, played a direct role in delaying the bridge's opening. We know that Michigan billionaire Matthew Maroon had lobbied the administration against the bridge. The Maroon family, of course, owns the Ambassador Bridge, and they were keen to maintain that monopoly. But in the face of that kind of pressure and facing what we're seeing from the Trump administration, how should you think Canada have played this differently then?
Look, over the last 15 months, rather than taking a wait-and-see approach, running around the world, decrying a world of fortresses, and then only to make a decision that a fortress North America was in our interest, organizing middle powers in a way that does not serve Canadian workers for the jobs and certainty that they require, thinking even about the kind of intensity that the Prime Minister and his cabinet has brought to Beijing over American states in which we have our principal trade arteries going to and will be for the foreseeable future. These are all decision points that the Prime Minister has made to prioritize everything else except a North American trade. About a month ago, he reversed course on his wait-and-see approach with America, flew to New York and said that building Canada strong was about making, quote, America great again. I think this has been not a very serious effort by the government to resolve long-standing trade disputes. We have millions of people who are living in objective anxiety in the auto sector, the lumber sector, the steel sector, the aluminum sector. Investment in this country has fled to the United States to the tune of about $1 trillion over the last decade, over $100 billion over the last year. We have an economic outlook that is both recessionary and flatlining quarter after quarter after quarter. And so that leads to the big decisions that the Prime Minister needed to make to build up our own Canadian strength. Whether it's on our critical minerals through a strategic reserve, unleashing our energy resources, ending anti-development and anti-pipeline and anti-shipping laws that have locked away investment from our country's prosperity, and creating a certainty and an environment of business certainty for our workers and our people to be able to plan and succeed. These are all decisions the Prime Minister has abrogated over the last 15 months. And I think that the cost of waiting for Canadians is objectively a very, very difficult time.
I mean, you allude there to the importance of business certainty and prioritizing everything that can be done to facilitate North American trade. And we are hearing from industry voices that are praising the deal for finally allowing the bridge to open. Flavio Volpe of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association said that having this asset functioning is a big bonus, as he put it, calling it another sign of what he called an emerging détente between Canada and the U.S. Stephen Laskowski of the Canadian Trucking Alliance said the bridge's opening will strengthen North America's integrated supply chain, reinforce the economic partnership between Canada and the U.S. Is there not some value in making a compromise here, some concessions on this file, if it means that this new trade corridor is finally able to get into service?
Look, the bridge opening is a good moment for Canada. It started with Prime Minister Harper over a decade ago, and it's certainly a project that is in the Canadian interest to see. But what I'm trying to tell you is that in this context of one bridge being open, the reason it was vulnerable in the first place is because Canada has failed to secure a deal with the United States and a deal from North America. That the games that are being played here have created vulnerabilities for our negotiating position at large. And now, 15 months into the Prime Minister's mandate, we look at the receipts, and I cannot identify a single win for Canada across the board. It's been loss after loss after loss, when it should be an opportunity for us to revitalize our auto sector, build a defense industrial base, have a resources and commodity sector that is unleashed, unlocked, and capable of really meeting the moment. I take a step back. I'm new on the portfolio of the Canada-U.S. relations, and I was thinking back to where the origin story for this really was. It was NAFTA decades ago that was forged at the end of the Soviet Empire. CUSMA and all the negotiations we're seeing now internationally, not just for North America, but everywhere, is because of the challenge posed by a rising China, a challenge to our economic supply chains, to energy, investment, and technologies that will define the next half century. Our country deserves a government that takes this moment seriously, that meets it with a serious plan. And that means that right at the outset, 15 months ago, we look at the entire North American relationship, which is a vast and complex one. The Canada-United States one is one of the most successful on planet Earth. There have been vulnerabilities in our trade negotiations that we should have been taken a lot more seriously, so that opportunities like this do not distract from our wider project of being able to succeed in this age of rivalry.
You alluded earlier to these tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, autos, lumber. Those are still all in place. Obviously, talks are still ongoing, but progress, I think we can say, is going at a snail's pace. It's going rather slowly. What do you think this bridge agreement signals for those CUSMA talks ahead? And similarly, if Mr. Trump is playing hardball and prepared to use this kind of leverage, then how should Canada respond? What cards specifically should Canada be playing right now?
Well, look, the wider things that Canada should be, we can control what we can control, we can't control what we can't control. And the government has our sympathy in negotiating with an unpredictable and tough negotiator in the presidency and President Trump. What we should be doing is building our strength. Could you imagine how different our country would look today had within the first 6 months after the last election, the country moved forward with the consensus that conservatives won, which was to establish national resource energy corridors, partnered with First Nations, and permitted within 6 months of application. Could you imagine what would have happened had we proposed, as Pierre Poilievre has, an Auto Pact 2.0 that would secure not only our own auto workers' future, but also expand North American production, including American production, from 11 to 13 million autos being sold around the world to our mutual success? Could you imagine what the world would look like had 15 months ago, Canada seriously unlocked its defense industrial base? We know that there's a glut in the allied world for the materials needed to secure the world. Could you imagine what would happen if we had unlocked a critical minerals strategic reserve? The key minerals and components required for advanced defense manufacturing and all the technologies to come, and to afford a tariff-free access market to the United States to be able to accomplish all of those things together. Could you imagine if the Prime Minister, instead of saying that on one side he's going to tilt toward Beijing and organize middle powers in Europe against Washington, he said, no, I understand that the Canadian destiny is a feature of our geography, that our economic and security interests are born from where we live and where we work and where we eat and where we aspire to our biggest dreams. Had the Prime Minister taken that task seriously of securing Canada and North America, I have a feeling that our country would be in a far more certain, far more prosperous, flourishing ahead with the might of what the country could do if it brought the ambition of a major and rising power. I think all of that opportunity cost has been left on the table. Instead, we've seen unserious negotiations around the world that have not produced a single investment for jobs, investment, or export. On CUSMA Day, on July 1st, Canada Day, when we should have renewed the deal on terms that would be advantageous to Canada. Instead, we see the Prime Minister announcing a Eurovision deal. I mean, tell that to the millwright whose mill is closed and whose town is closing, that he at least can now watch an episode of Eurovision. That's not serious to me. That's not the ambition of a country that is focused, of a government that's focused. And I think that the government should be held accountable for that, because Canadians can't afford the cost of waiting anymore.
Okay, Shuvaloy Majumdar, Conservative Critic for Canada-U.S. Relations. We'll need to leave it there. Thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.